Activision CEO Bobby Kotick. Not only does the company he runs nickel and dime players by generally forcing horrible monetization methods into its games, for example, making players play $1 for a red dot in Call of Duty, on top of paying full price for the game itself. Well, apparently, if the Washington Post is to be believed, he's been manipulating the stock markets for personal gain, ripping off the investors by lying to them and making millions of dollars in return. Here to discuss this all is Mr. Henry Cooper.
Hello. Now, we would like to assure you that we're not accusing anyone of anything. We've just got the information from the Washington Post. We're not blaming anybody.
Disclaimer alert, just so we don't get sued. Henry, tell us about the man, the myth, the legend, the devil himself, Mr. Bobby Kotick.
Well, for anyone who is unfamiliar with this chap, he is one of the biggest villains in video games. He's up there with your Andrew Wilsons from EA. And talking of ripping off investors just there, it's pretty ironic that that's coming from a man who once said the long-term focus and commitment to providing superior returns to our shareholders. So he's all about helping the shareholders, but apparently it looks like that may not be the case. He's had other chart-topping hits, like in 2009, where he said, you know, if it was left to me, I would raise the prices even further. And then, of course, there was his amazing follow-up the same year. The goal that I had in bringing a lot of packaged goods folks into Activision about 10 years ago was to take all the fun out of making video games.
Ouch.
How about 2012's Think about what it's like for my dating life when the first picture that comes up is me as the devil.
My heart bleeds.
Then here I thought they liked 'em horny.
Me so horny.
And don't forget the all-time 2008 classic. There will continue to be opportunities for us to exploit the PC platform in ways that we haven't yet.
That was a classic.
It is a certified gold record up in the Hall of Fame. He really is. He's a pantomime villain at this point, but he is being investigated for some potentially quite serious stuff by the Washington Post, and they've got some interesting implications, right?
That's for sure. Now, in February 2017, Activision announced a $1 billion program to buy back its own shares. Now, according to the Washington Post, as it reported on Thursday, on February the 10th, a day after the company announced the buyback plan, Bobby Kotick, Activision's chief executive, sold nearly 4 million shares for $180 million. The average share price of his sales was 15% higher than he would have gotten before the stock rose on the news. So, Activision announced buyback, the stock prices raise, Bobby Kotick himself sells off a load of shares for $27 million more than he would have done the day before the announcement. But here's the rub, right? Washington Post reports Activision ended the buyback program late last year without buying back any shares. So they announced they were going to do a buyback, so the stock price is raised. They didn't end up buying back anything, and Bobby Kotick made a shitload of money off it in return.
And that's him personally, not Activision Blizzard as a big enterprise company. He personally made a whole lot of money by dumping his shares at the artificially inflated rate.
And here's the thing, right? The CEO themselves are the ones who announce or decide whether the buyback is happening. So Bobby Kotick himself is the one authorizing the buybacks, and he's the one pulling the strings. So he's orchestrated this whole thing, and he's made a profit of $27 million just by announcing something that they didn't actually follow through with, but he just made $27 million just for the back of it.
And strictly speaking, this is all legal because they've even done it in the past.
Yeah, and the Washington Post reports the company also announced a $750 million repurchase program in February 2015 that ended 2 years later with no shares bought. So it's not the first time that they've done it, obviously. Apparently EA have been at it too, no surprise there. And Washington Post says in 2017, Andrew Wilson, the CEO of video game maker Electronic Arts, sold $2.1 million worth of stock within 23 days of the announcement of a $1.2 billion buyback at prices 12 to 19% higher than before the announcement.
So it's like 12 to 19% profit, kind of just out of nowhere. This is where people are saying that it may be market manipulation, but then some people say maybe it isn't. We don't really know. We're not finance whizzes, but I've got a bit of an analogy for it to try and help you understand. It's not a perfect analogy, but I think it's okay. So you got person A, and they walk up to a guy and say, I sold you some pots, I'd like to buy them back. Person B says, okay, that'll be $4. So it's $4 for the pot. Person C then says, oh, I want those pots, I'll pay $5. Person D jumps in, I'll pay $6 for those pots, so the price is going up and up and up. Then person A, they never actually buy any of the pots, but now at this artificially inflated price, he sells his own personal supply of pots at the increased rate. And what makes this interesting is that person A secretly owns the shop which is selling the pots. okay, which is the Bobby Kotick or Andrew Wilson type person, the executive in this scenario. So they profit from the sales at the increased rate. Person B is just a current shareholder, just someone who's got X amount of shares in the company and is willing to make that sale. Persons C and D would be investors or shareholders or even the company's own employees who would be interested in buying stuff. So it's those people who are getting fucked up. I don't have any sympathy for investors because they're all greedy money grabbers in my opinion, but the employees getting fucked up by their own company, that's just astounding.
So you might be asking, what is a buyback specifically, and why does it inflate share prices? Why do companies do it? Well, a company's made up of shares, for those of you who don't know, and if you own a share, it means you own a portion of the company, and therefore you can reap some of the profits. And there's two main ways for an investor to make money from owning shares. The first one is the company pays a dividend to shareholders. So if you've got a lot of profit one year, the company will distribute some of that profit to each part owner of the company or each shareholder. The other main way to make money out of being a shareholder is by the company absorbing some of the shares or buying them back, right? And I've got a little example for you here. So if a company is worth $100 and it's made up of 100 shares, each of those shares is worth $1. Then the company buys back 50 of those shares, that dissolves those 50 shares, and as a result, in theory, the company is still worth that $100, but is now made up of only 50 remaining shares instead of that 100. So each of those 50 remaining shares is now worth $2 instead of $1, which is how a company buying back shares will increase the value of each remaining share, which then profits the people who own shares, which is why announcing a buyback will raise the share price as investors clamber to purchase shares for themselves, which should raise in value once the buyback actually happens. But in this instance, they bought shares and the buyback didn't happen. That's just lying, isn't it? Scandalously lying, basically.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Is it's saying you're going to do something, people and the stock market responds to that, but then you don't do what you said you were going to do. But it is technically legal. Like the SEC don't have any major restrictions on it, and Bobby Kotick himself has said that this is fine, like it's all good. So the quote here is, consistent with common practice, we don't comment on why we purchase or do not purchase shares, but it is completely incorrect and irresponsible to assert, it may be a typo there, could mean assert, to assert that our board of directors authorizations were entered into for any improper purpose. So we definitely didn't do it to artificially drive up share prices. We definitely didn't, but we're not going to tell you why we actually did it. We're not even going to bother coming up with an excuse.
Yeah, exactly. And I love this quote. It's like, we don't comment on it, but I'm about to comment on it.
Yeah.
And not only that, he says, completely incorrect and irresponsible to assert that we entered in it for any improper purpose. And for me, it's like, it's a piece of shit on the floor here, right? It smells like a piece of shit and it looks like a piece of shit, but it's improper and irresponsible of me to assert that is a piece of shit. That can't be a piece of shit because that's improper. Come on, Bobby. Who are you kidding, dude? It's not improper for us to question this because it looks like a piece of shit. It smells like a piece of shit. Oh my God, you are a piece of shit, Bobby Kotick.
I think it's more responsible to do the piece of shit on the floor or to artificially drive up prices like this. But hey, that's just me.
You shit on floor, €50 fine. Each time.
I think it's funny how this all coincides with a quarterly sales slump for Activision Blizzard. You know, all of this stock buyback information coming out now as all of their numbers are a little bit down for this quarter. So apparently net revenue is down 15%, and that's like general sales across digital and physical and everything. And net bookings, which includes microtransactions and digital purchases through your games and stuff, they're down 27% for the whole company, for Activision, for Blizzard, for King, the mobile developer. And they're also going through a big push in the future for mobile games and free-to-play content, yay for everyone. As we introduce mobile and free-to-play games based on our franchises, we believe we can increase audience size, engagement, and monetization across our wholly owned franchises. We are confident we will remain a leader in connecting and engaging the world through epic entertainment. I mean, we've got Death Stranding to connect the world, right? We don't need this. We're going to connect everyone together.
Yeah. This is Bobby Kotick's justification of these bad figures this quarter. We are confident we will remain a leader in connecting and engaging the world.
Were you ever a leader?
But just using buzzwords like connection, engagement, epic entertainment. That's not selling anybody any shares. And the fact that they're going to be focusing on mobile and free-to-play games tells you something, right? That their AAA market, the AAA games that they're producing now aren't making the money that they need to be making, or aren't succeeding. Basically, they're just failing in that area. So they're going to try and cash in on the mobile and free-to-play market. What does that tell you, Bobby? Maybe focus on making better games instead of trying to squeeze people for monetization after they've already paid for games. Battle passes, for example, the new thing in Call of Duty this year, which replaced the loot boxes from last year, which are actually still there. Although you say, oh, no loot boxes this year, we'll still have them in last year's game. And then that on top of all the other microtransactions and bullshit that you throw in your games. Like, just focus on making good games. Maybe people will buy them. Maybe they'll be supported by the communities, and maybe you won't be such a downright villain.
It's definitely the CEOs and people at the top, the boards, the directors who are most principally involved in this, because collectively they tend to hold the majority shares in a company so that they can stay in control of the business and they can still pull all the strings. So they're not putting any money on the line by doing this buyback because they're not actually buying them back.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, Bobby Kotick himself, he apparently owns a reported 175 million shares in Activision. He sold 4 million of those, so it's like a very small percentage of his overall shareholding to make that 180 million, which he did in February.
That's personal. That's just for him, not for Activision Blizzard. That's just him.
And he didn't buy them in the first place. He gets them when he created the company, whatever. He's the founder of the company. He owns that just because he's an owner of the company. And anyone who joins the company at a boardroom level will automatically get issued shares as like stock options as part of the thing. So these executives don't buy these shares to begin with. They just get given a share of the company just because that's their job.
And now, I'm not one to want to say that this is market manipulation, because as I said, I'm not finance whiz or anything like that. These numbers go way over my head a lot of the time. But the SEC, the US Securities and Exchange Commissioner Robert Jackson, kind of suggests that it might be. So he says, isn't it market manipulation for a company to say we're doing a buyback and then an officer says, I'm going to sell? It's a bit of a leading question. Like, it seems to suggest that that's his line of thinking, but without overtly saying anything.
Yeah, he's posing the question, isn't he? He's drawing attention to this fact that this is what they're doing. And what he didn't mention there is that they never actually buy back the shares. So it's complete manipulation is what it is. That's what he's suggesting. But apparently this is allowed by the SEC rules. Like, he's one of the guys, the commissioner of the SEC, and they're the ones making the rules. So shouldn't he be the one answering that question and sorting this shit out, because he's allowed to do this? Basically, he's fucking over his own investors as well as his player base. And what does he expect, right? I mean, isn't this just like him just manipulating this whole position for his own personal gain?
I mean, to me, it's just corporations doing what corporations do. It's screwing over their own investors, screwing over their own employees to make personal profit. All these millions he's made, that's from his personal stock that he's driven the price up of and is sold for himself.
Yeah.
To gain himself, not for the greater good of the business or anything like that. It's just corporations doing what corporations do.
Yeah. If you were an investor, you'd be very dubious about buying into Activision Blizzard in the future, because whenever they announce one of these stocks, there's two times in a row now they've announced a buyback and not actually followed through with it.
Yeah.
And hopefully investors get wise and maybe cotton onto the fact that they might not see a return on that investment from Activision, and maybe stay away from those shares. In return, like, Bobby Kotick's got to get his shit together and start trying to make money legitimately. Can I say that? Am I sued yet? Trying better ways to make money, right? As in delivering proper products, proper wholesome products, without trying to nickel dime the players, as well as trying to make a bit of a buck off manipulating investors.
Well, I think if you are feeling particularly anti-corporate after all this, by all means go and play a game like The Outer Worlds, which has been a commercial and critical success, apparently, according to Take-Two themselves. So they're a corporation who are generally quite dodgy as well, but they've made a good game that has sold well. We haven't got any exact sales figures, but it's been a big success.
Can you imagine that? They've provided a decent game, no additional monetization, no bollocks, just a full game for the price, no pre-order bonuses, no nonsense like that whatsoever, and it's exceeded their expectations. Oh my god, it's like a revelation. Why don't they just do that all the time?
Nope, that's not going to stay the same. I mean, Take-Two, they also own the Red Dead Redemption and GTA licenses, so I wouldn't expect any of that to change for that company anytime soon. But hey, every now and then we do get a good game out of these companies, like the Outer Worlds, so we can just hope that more of these happen. Anyway, those are just our thoughts on the Washington Post's latest investigation into the likes of Activision's Bobby Kotick and EA's Andrew Wilson and their different financial goings-on with regard to stocks and buybacks and all that. Make sure to leave a comment down below, because this was a lot of complex information that we probably don't understand, so feel free to correct us in the comments, let us know what you think. Hit that like button and the subscribe button. Go on over to patreon.com/prettygoodgaming to support the content we create, because we're not a greedy corporation. We'll see you next time. I've been Henry, he's been Gaz. Bye for now.